Hi, my name's Mike Bradlee, and we're here at the Summit Community Garden on Summit Ave in Providence, and we're doing a quick video and demonstration of the new 3-bin compost system that was put in place last year, and we're just starting to get up to speed. So first I'll talk about the unit itself and describe this style, and then we'll go into some other details about what's in the bins. You can see there's leaves in each of these bays at the moment, and I will also introduce the tools that you can use for composting. So very quickly, this is called a 3-bin compost system, or 3-bay composter, and sometimes referred to as a 3-season compost system. You can see each of these bays are equivalent. They are filled with leaves. They're all the same size, and they could either be used equivalently, where you'd compost in each of them, or you could define each chamber to have a certain function and to utilize it in a manner that's strategic for whatever your composting methods are. And so commonly what happens is when you start composting in these bays, you will compost in a single bay, and you will progress through the composting process in that bay until it's full, and then you would cap it, and then you would move on to the second one. Repeat the process, compost in that until it's full, and once again compost in that till it's full. And at that point, the idea is the first bay would, during that time that you work through each of those 3 bays, the first bay would be at a finished state after the process of filling up the entire system. At that point, what you can do is you can move the finished compost out of the bay and either sift it or move it directly into the garden. Sometimes that's more personal rather than a specific requirement for composting. Composting can be chunky, it can be nice fine filtered. Some people compost just vegetable scraps, other people will compost meat scraps. Here at this garden at the moment, we're only using leaves, and when we get towards the gardening season, we'll compost garden scraps. We won't be composting food scraps at this time in any appreciable amount, and it's done for purposefully. One is because this is a new compost system, and it's good to have some time to learn the system, to get things under your belt before adding any materials that could be of high risk. So we'll describe a little bit about the materials that are in here. We have 3 different types of leaf brush and fiber matter. In this first one, it's more brush. You can see there's some sticks in here. The material contains not just leaves but some vines. It also contains, it might be hard to see, but there are some seed heads from maple trees in here as well. So we've got seeds, we've got sticks, we've got vine material along with a bunch of leaves. In this next bay, you can see that this is much more of simply leaf matter. And the final bay also has a lot of leaf matter, but also some different garden scraps. This is scraps from irises and some other garden material, and you can see it's long and stringy, as well as mixed with some leaf material. Now each of those could present a challenge when mixing, and it's important to understand the materials and how they will behave when you're mixing. And I'll go through a quick demonstration of the tools, and then we'll wrap this up. All right. So you can see we have 2 different styles of mixers. This is a hand auger, and this is more like a plunger style. You can see it has these wings on a hinge, and you would plunge that into the material and pull it up, where this one you would rotate it into the material and pull it up. Now, body mechanics is really important. I'm not an expert, but I can give some recommendations that you always want to keep the tool in front of you. You don't want to have it too far out. You want to have it so that it's below your shoulders, and you want to ensure that your knees are flexible, and when you pull up, that you don't pull back, but you pull straight up, and that you keep your elbows as close to your side as possible while you're doing that, not out like winged, and without straining. Okay, so we're going to quickly run through these two tools. We'll mix them through each of these bays and just see how the materials behave. So starting in this first bay, you see we of course have the viney material. So a lot of vines in a mixture, you can imagine this might get tangled. We'll see. Sometimes it doesn't, but essentially if we're using the auger corkscrew style, you would rotate it in and then lift it up. And you can see the material, a lot of it comes up, and it may be that it's catching on something, which yes it is.
You can also see that it's composting down below.
And you can see that as well. So if I can hold this up, that's clear. There's even some worms in here. So winter composting, organisms are still active. They're just slower, but it will still progress towards that finished stage. And you can see some of these leaves have really turned a nice dark chocolate color. That means that the organisms are still active even during this winter time. You also notice that stuff does catch on this, but it's easy to slough it off. So I'll mix through this just a couple of times and see if we notice I have to fuss with it a little bit. Sometimes when you first start a pile, and especially if you're working with material like this, there's a little bit of fussing involved. There's a little bit of using your hands. That's common. Composting is a physical activity, and
you can wear gloves.
You can wear gloves. I chose not to, but you're welcome to wear gloves. Okay? So notice those vines do get caught on there. One strategy for working with vines is to have garden snips and to cut them to certain lengths, smaller lengths, so that they easily blend and don't entangle.
I do that.
Yeah. So this second bin, this is mostly leaves. I'm not sure what necessarily is below it, but you can see they're also very dry, and if we're storing leaves for the winter, we actually want to store them dry. It's better to do that than to allow them to be exposed to the elements and get rained or snowed on and absorb too much moisture while they're sitting and waiting to be composted. But let's mix this.
Do you make a point of getting all the way to the bottom?
Yeah. So you can see the leaves still do get caught on this a little bit, but it's actually a little easier to mix. Of course, when it's light and fluffy, as you lift up the mixer, stuff could spill out. Be aware of that. Try to keep the space clean, so if material does spill out, you always want to put it back into the bin.
Looks like it's composting too.
Right? You can see down below there's a lot of compost happening.
Is it hot?
And there's no heat to it. It's cold.
Yep.
But there's organisms that work at cold temperatures. And they're pretty active. You'll also notice that when you do mix it, the material gets fluffed up. This actually helps with aeration. It creates more space and allows for more oxygen to infiltrate the system. So this final bay, you can imagine what would happen, that we will mix this and have a similar result. Yep. Yep, everything gets dragged up when the composting is fresh, so the material is new.
And there's your stuff that's composting down below.
Right, and there's your stuff composting down below. So you can see there's some really nice compost action happening even during these winter months. And these leaves are only put there in November and December. Okay, so I know that was fairly simple, but it's important to understand that the quality of the leaf matter, the brush that you collect for your composting will impact how you compost and may require, you know, certain procedures for ensuring that they blend well. So that's a demonstration of this auger tool, and I'll show you this actually just to say these are very easy to use. They're much more lower impact. If you notice, I could easily rotate this into the material and then pull it back out. That's an important point because with a lot of action at your shoulders, it can put a strain on your shoulders, your back, as well as your neck. This next type of compost mixer is a plunger style, or sometimes I call a harpoon style. You'll see these wings on the hinge, and that is pressed in there. These wings will collapse, and then once it's at the bottom, they'll open back up, and when you lift the material, that will lift it up. But you'll also notice it's a little more exertion required, and it's hard to get through some of that material by just plunging into it. But you do notice not much gets entangled on this. So there's different qualities of the tools that are advantageous, and some are weaknesses. It's important to recognize that in choosing which tool to use. And sometimes you might even use a tool during a different part of the composting process. So that's a quick demonstration of some tools and the materials that are contained within this. What we're going to do is decide whether we continue to mix one of these and see how it progresses over the next couple of months. If there's any questions or feedback, maybe we'll respond to see what the Summit Community Garden would like to see at this point. We'll try to save as much leaves as we can so that when we get to the garden season that we can use that, and the goal will be to develop a composting regimen and schedule so that we can start to create compost for the garden. Thank you for listening. Again, my name is Mike Bradlee, and Greg Garrett was helping filming today, and we really appreciate you taking the time to view this video. Any questions, let me know. Thank you.